I was standing in my backyard, staring at the propane tank that had served me faithfully for 3 years, when Sharon Pemberton appeared at my fence line with that look on her face. You know the look. The one that says someone has appointed themselves the moral guardian of suburban aesthetics and found you wanting. Sharon was the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates in Gilbert, Arizona, and she took her position with the kind of seriousness most people reserve for actual emergencies. "Isaac Anderson," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the pleasant October morning. "We need to talk about that eyesore." She was pointing at my propane tank, the standard white cylindrical tank that literally everyone with a gas grill and a pool heater owned. It sat on a concrete pad near the back corner of my property, partially screened by my fence but visible if you really wanted to look for it. "What about it?" I asked, walking over to the fence. Sharon pulled out her phone and started reading from what I assumed was some HOA document. Section 7.3 of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowner Guidelines states that all exterior fixtures must be aesthetically pleasing and in harmony with the community's visual standards. Your propane tank is neither. I blinked. "It's a propane tank, Sharon. They all look like that." "That's not my problem, Isaac. The HOA board has voted, and we're issuing you a notice of violation. You have 30 days to remedy the situation or face fines of $100 per day." She thrust a folded piece of paper at me over the fence. I took it, too stunned to immediately respond. When I finally found my words, she was already walking away, her sensible pumps clicking against my neighbor's driveway as she headed toward her next victim. I unfolded the letter. Sure enough, there it was in official-looking letterhead, complete with a terrible logo some board member's nephew probably designed for free. Notice of violation. The propane tank that had been perfectly acceptable for 3 years was suddenly a community crisis. My phone buzzed. It was my girlfriend, Claire Evans, texting me about dinner plans. I fired off a quick reply that we needed to talk about something ridiculous first. When Claire arrived that evening, she found me still in the backyard, sitting on my patio and glaring at the offending propane tank. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," she said after I explained the situation. "Sharon, who has pink flamingos in her front yard 9 months out of the year, thinks your completely standard propane tank is ugly. Apparently, the flamingos are whimsical and add character," I said. I looked it up in the HOA guidelines. There's actually an exception for seasonal decorations and items that promote community spirit. Claire walked over to the tank and studied it. "So what are you going to do? Move it?" "Can't. This is the only spot where the gas lines work, and it needs to be this distance from the house for safety codes." I checked. Moving it would cost thousands, and I'd have to tear up half my yard to relocate the lines. Box it in with landscaping. Section 7.4 requires all utility access points to remain clearly visible and accessible. A propane company needs to be able to service it, and apparently Sharon considers decorative screening to be hiding a violation rather than fixing one. Claire sat down next to me. "She really has it out for you, doesn't she?" That was the understatement of the year. Sharon Pemberton had been on my case since I moved into Meadowbrook Estates. First, it was my lawn being a 1/4 inch too long during a stretch when I was traveling for work. Then it was my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. After that, she complained about my car being parked in my own driveway for more than 24 consecutive hours. The woman was a menace with a clipboard and too much free time. "There has to be a loophole," Claire said. "What if you painted it?" I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the HOA documents I had downloaded. "Painting or decorating the tank? Let me see. There's nothing that says I can't paint it." "Wait, really? The guidelines say it needs to be aesthetically pleasing. They don't specify how you make it aesthetically pleasing. They just say it can't be an eyesore. A smile spread across Claire's face. You're going to paint it. I'm going to do better than that, I said, an idea forming. I'm going to commission a mural on it. The next morning, I started researching local artists. Gilbert had a surprisingly vibrant art community, and I found several muralists who specialized in large-scale outdoor works. After looking through portfolios, I reached out to 3 artists whose styles I liked. The first one to respond was a woman named Isabella Martinez. Her portfolio showed incredible desert landscapes, realistic portraits, and some abstract pieces that somehow made old buildings look like works of art. When I explained what I wanted, she laughed for a solid minute. "Let me get this straight," Isabella said when we met at a coffee shop on Gilbert Road. "Your HOA president says your propane tank is ugly, and you want to paint a mural on it to comply with their aesthetic standards." "Exactly. I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be so aesthetically pleasing that Sharon Pemberton has to eat her words." Isabella grinned. "I love this. Okay, so what are we thinking? Desert scene, something abstract, geometric patterns." We spent the next hour brainstorming. Isabella sketched out several concepts, and finally, we landed on something perfect. A Trompe l'oeil design that would make the propane tank look like it wasn't even there, blended seamlessly into the desert landscape behind it with Arizona wildflowers, saguaro cacti, and a sunset that would match the actual sunsets visible from my backyard. "This is going to be my masterpiece," Isabella said. "Also, you're paying for my coffee for the rest of the year if this goes viral." "Deal," I said. Isabella quoted me a price that made me wince, but it was still cheaper than moving the tank. We shook hands, and she said she could start the following week. I sent a carefully worded email to the HOA that evening. "Dear board members, I am in receipt of the violation notice regarding my propane tank. I am taking steps to remedy the situation in accordance with Section 7.3 by commissioning professional artwork to ensure the fixture meets aesthetic standards. Work will begin on October 23rd and should be completed within 1 week. Sincerely, Isaac Anderson." Sharon's response came within 20 minutes. "The board will need to approve any modifications to exterior fixtures. Submit your plans within 5 business days for review." I forwarded Isabella's digital mock-up the same night. 2 days later, I received a response from the entire HOA board. Apparently, Sharon had escalated this to everyone. The email was a mess of corporate speak, but the gist was that they didn't believe a painted propane tank would meet community standards. They suggested I consider relocating the tank or replacing it with a smaller, more attractive model. I wrote back pointing out that my tank was the standard size for a home my size with gas heating and a pool heater. A smaller tank would be inadequate and unsafe. As for relocating, I included quotes from 3 different propane companies showing it would cost between $7,000 and $12,000. The HOA guidelines do not require homeowners to undertake financially unreasonable modifications, I wrote. I am proceeding with the mural as planned. If the board finds the professionally painted tank to be in violation after completion, we can discuss the matter further at that time. I copied my lawyer on the email. I didn't have an HOA lawyer specifically, but my friend Derek from college had helped me review the community guidelines when I bought the house. He thought the whole situation was hilarious and offered to help pro bono just for the entertainment value. October 23rd arrived with perfect weather. Isabella showed up at 8 in the morning with her supplies, a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock, and enough energy to power my entire neighborhood. Ready to make some HOA president cry? She asked. Let's do this. The first step was cleaning and priming the tank. Isabella explained that proper surface prep was crucial for outdoor murals, especially in Arizona where the sun could be brutal. She spent most of the first day just getting the surface ready and sketching out her design in chalk. By day 2, the real painting began. I worked from home, so I spent the day in my office but took frequent breaks to watch Isabella work. She started with the background, blocking in the sky with gorgeous shades of orange, pink, and purple that perfectly matched Arizona sunsets. You're not actually going to make it disappear, are you? I asked during one break. You'll see, Isabella said mysteriously. Trust the process. My neighbors started noticing by day 3. Tom from next door came over to see what was happening. Sharon's going to lose her mind, he said, watching Isabella paint delicate saguaro cactus details. That's kind of the point, I admitted. Good, Tom said. Last month she cited me for having the wrong color rocks in my front yard landscaping. Apparently there's a 6-rock color palette we're supposed to choose from. I didn't get the memo. By day 4, more neighbors were stopping by. The mural was taking shape, and it was stunning. Isabella had created a desert landscape that looked 3-dimensional, with wildflowers that seemed to sway in an invisible breeze and cacti that looked real enough to touch. This is amazing, said Michelle from across the street. I want one for my AC unit. Get Sharon to cite you first, I joked. Then you have an excuse. Michelle laughed, but there was truth in it. Half the neighborhood had been on the receiving end of Sharon's violation notices at some point. Day 5 was when Sharon showed up. Isabella was adding finishing touches, tiny details that made the mural come alive. Shadows under rocks, highlights on the cactus flowers, subtle shading that made the entire propane tank seem to recede into the landscape behind it. What is this? Sharon's voice cut across my yard. I walked outside. Good morning, Sharon. This is the aesthetic improvement you requested. She stared at the mural, her face going through several shades of red. This is not what I meant. You can't just paint the tank. The guidelines say all exterior fixtures must be aesthetically pleasing. I'm making it aesthetically pleasing. There's nothing in the rules that prohibits painting a propane tank. This is ridiculous. You're making a mockery of the HOA. Isabella turned around from her work, paintbrush in hand. Madam, I'm a professional muralist. I've done work for the city of Phoenix, several local businesses, and 3 schools. I don't do mockery, I do art, Sharon sputtered. The board will hear about this. The board already knows, I said calmly. I informed them of my plans as requested. If you have concerns about the completed work, you can raise them at the next board meeting. Until then, please let the artist finish her work. Sharon left in a huff, but not before taking several photos with her phone. Isabella turned back to me. Is she always like that? That was actually her being relatively calm. By day 6, the mural was complete. Isabella had outdone herself. The propane tank had been transformed into a piece of art that genuinely enhanced my backyard. The Trompe l'oeil effect was incredible. From certain angles, the tank seemed to disappear entirely into the desert landscape. From others, it was clearly visible but beautiful, a painted portal to Arizona's natural beauty. Isabella took photos from every angle, already planning her social media posts. This is going in my portfolio, she said. Also, I'm calling this piece compliance. I paid her the remainder of her fee and added a substantial tip. She deserved it. The mural was better than I had imagined. Post it everywhere, I told her. Tag it, share it, make it viral. I want the world to see what happens when an HOA tries to abuse their power. Isabella grinned. Oh, honey, I'm already on it. That evening, I sent another email to the HOA board with professional photos of the completed mural. The aesthetic improvements to my propane tank have been completed. The fixture now meets and exceeds the community's visual standards as outlined in Section 7.3. Please confirm that the violation notice has been resolved. The response took 3 days. In that time, Isabella's social media posts exploded. The mural went viral on Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. Local news outlets picked up the story. Arizona news stations contacted me for interviews. The narrative was irresistible. Homeowner battles ridiculous HOA with beautiful art. I gave several interviews, always careful to be respectful but honest. I explained the situation, showed the before and after photos, and talked about how HOA boards sometimes overstep their authority. The story resonated with people who had their own HOA horror stories. By the time the HOA board finally responded, the mural had been featured on Phoenix's ABC 15 and Fox 10 News. Good Morning, Arizona wanted to do a segment. The Phoenix New-Times ran an article titled, "Gilbert Man Turns HOA Violation into Art Installation." The board's response was terse. The board has reviewed the modifications to your propane tank. While the artistic quality is noted, this does not resolve the underlying violation. The fixture itself remains non-compliant. The board maintains that a painted propane tank does not meet community aesthetic standards. You have 15 days to remove or relocate the tank or face fines. I forwarded the email to Derek. "They're insane," he said when he called me. "You've literally made it aesthetically pleasing. That's what they asked for. Can they do this?" Technically, they can try. But their guidelines are vague enough that you have a strong case. The problem is that fighting an HOA can be expensive and time-consuming. What if we don't fight them in court? What if we fight them in the court of public opinion? Derek was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking?" The next HOA board meeting is in 2 weeks. These meetings are supposed to be open to homeowners. I'm thinking we pack it with people who want to see the mural. Neighbors, reporters, supporters. Make it impossible for them to be unreasonable. That's actually not a bad idea. Public pressure can be very effective. I spent the next week rallying support. I created a Facebook group called Save the Mural and invited everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. Tom from next door became my unofficial campaign manager, spreading the word and encouraging neighbors to attend the meeting. The response was overwhelming. It turned out that years of Sharon Pemberton's petty tyranny had created a lot of resentment in the community. People were excited to finally have a reason to push back. Michelle from across the street made flyers. Another neighbor, Robert, created a petition supporting the mural that collected over 200 signatures. Even people from outside the neighborhood signed it after seeing the news coverage. The local art community got involved too. Isabella shared the story with other artists, and several offered to speak at the HOA meeting about the value of public art and community beautification. The news coverage continued. A reporter from the Arizona Republic came to photograph the mural and interview me for a feature story. She was fascinated by the whole situation. "This is such a perfect example of HOA overreach," she said. "Do you mind if I reach out to the HOA board for comment?" "Please do." The article ran 5 days before the board meeting. It was fair but definitely sympathetic to my position. The reporter had done her homework, digging into Meadowbrook Estate's history of violation notices, and finding several other residents willing to talk about their experiences with Sharon Pemberton. Sharon declined to comment for the article, but another board member, Greg Thompson, gave a quote about maintaining community standards. It came across as tone-deaf given the context. The day of the HOA meeting arrived. Board meetings were typically held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that could hold maybe 50 people comfortably. Over 150 people showed up. The clubhouse was packed to capacity, with overflow spilling into the parking lot. News cameras set up outside. Claire squeezed through the crowd to find me. "This is insane," she said. "Half of Gilbert is here. Good. Let them try to ignore this." Inside, Sharon and the other 4 board members looked shell-shocked. The meeting was supposed to start at 7. At 6:45, Sharon attempted to call things to order. "Due to fire code restrictions, we need to ask some people to leave," she announced. "Then move the meeting outside," someone shouted. "We can't just move the meeting." "Why not? There's a perfectly good parking lot right there." After 15 minutes of chaos, the board reluctantly agreed to move the meeting outside. Someone brought out a folding table. The board members sat on one side looking miserable while a crowd of neighbors, reporters, and supporters gathered around. "This meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board is called to order," Sharon said, her voice tight. "We have several items on the agenda. We want to talk about the propane tank." Someone yelled. Sharon's jaw clenched. "That matter is under review and not open for discussion tonight." "The hell it isn't," that was Tom. "You sent Isaac a violation notice for a completely normal propane tank. He spent thousands of dollars to make it beautiful, and now you're saying it's still not good enough. That's garbage, Sharon, and you know it." The crowd erupted in agreement. Sharon banged a gavel on the folding table, but it was like trying to quiet a riot with a whisper. "Order, we need order." Derek, who had come to support me, stood up. He had his lawyer voice on. "I'm Derek Murphy, attorney at law. I'd like to address the board if I may." Sharon looked like she wanted to refuse, but with cameras rolling and 100 witnesses, she nodded. "The Meadowbrook Estates community guidelines require exterior fixtures to be aesthetically pleasing," Derek said. "My client has complied with this requirement by commissioning professional artwork on the fixture in question." The board's continued insistence that a beautifully painted propane tank is somehow less compliant than an unpainted one is not only illogical but potentially actionable as harassment. "We have the right to enforce community standards," Greg Thompson, another board member, interjected. "You have the right to enforce reasonable standards in a reasonable manner," Derek corrected. Requiring a homeowner to spend thousands relocating a tank when a much less expensive aesthetic solution exists is not reasonable, especially when your own guidelines don't actually prohibit what my client has done. A woman I didn't recognize stood up. "I'm Martha Chen, and I'm an art professor at Arizona State University. I drove down here after seeing the news coverage because I wanted to speak about the mural itself. I've seen it in person, and it's genuinely excellent work." The artist demonstrated real skill in creating a piece that enhances rather than detracts from the environment. To call this an eyesore is, frankly, insulting to both the artist and to anyone with aesthetic sense. More people spoke. Neighbors shared their own HOA violation stories. Local business owners talked about how the mural had brought positive attention to Gilbert. A city councilman who lived in a different neighborhood showed up to observe and ended up commenting on how public art could benefit communities. Through it all, Sharon sat with her arms crossed, her face growing redder. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, another board member named Patricia Wilson spoke up. She was an older woman I had barely seen at previous meetings. "I think we need to be honest here," Patricia said. "This isn't about the propane tank. This is about Sharon not liking Isaac because he pushed back on previous violations. We all know it. The painted tank is beautiful. I've seen it. It's 100 times better looking than a plain white tank. I move that we drop the violation and move on." Sharon turned on her. "You can't just make a motion without board discussion." "I'm discussing it right now. We look like fools. The entire state is watching us harass a homeowner who did exactly what we asked. He made the tank aesthetically pleasing. Mission accomplished. Let it go." Another board member, a younger guy named Jason, nodded. "I agree. This has gotten out of hand. I second Patricia's motion." "We are not voting on this tonight," Sharon snapped. "Why not?" Patricia demanded. "We have a quorum. We can vote on anything we want." The crowd started chanting. "Vote! Vote! Vote!" Sharon looked like she might spontaneously combust, but she was trapped. With cameras rolling and the entire neighborhood watching, she had no choice. "Fine. All in favor of dropping the violation notice." Patricia and Jason raised their hands immediately. After a long moment, Greg reluctantly raised his as well. Opposed, Sharon and the fifth board member, a quiet woman named Linda, raised their hands. "The motion passes 3-2, Patricia announced. "The violation is dropped." The crowd erupted in cheers. Claire hugged me. Tom clapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell over. Sharon gathered her papers and stormed off without another word. The meeting dissolved into chaos, with reporters trying to get statements and neighbors celebrating. A reporter from Fox 10 interviewed me right there in the parking lot. "How do you feel right now?" "Relieved," I said honestly. "I just wanted to keep my propane tank and have a nice-looking backyard. I'm glad common sense prevailed." The story dominated local news for the next few days. The general consensus was that the HOA had overreached and been appropriately checked by community pressure. Several articles used the incident as a jumping-off point for broader discussions about HOA reform and homeowner rights. Isabella's mural became a local landmark. People started stopping by to take photos of it. My neighbors were good-natured about the sudden tourist traffic, especially since most visitors were respectful. A week after the meeting, Patricia Wilson called me. "Isaac, I wanted to apologize on behalf of the board," she said. "This whole situation was ridiculous from the start. Sharon has been pushing the boundaries of reasonable enforcement for a while now, and this was the last straw." "I appreciate that, Patricia. Are you expecting more drama, actually? That's why I'm calling." Sharon resigned from the board yesterday. So did Linda. They both felt the board no longer aligned with their vision for the community. I tried not to laugh. Their vision being tyrannical enforcement of arbitrary rules. Patricia did laugh. "Something like that. We're having a special election in 2 weeks to fill the seats. I wanted to ask if you'd consider running." That surprised me. Me? I don't know anything about running an HOA. You know about fairness and common sense, which is more than I can say for some board members we've had. Think about it. I told her I would. That evening, Claire and I sat in my backyard, looking at the mural. The sunset behind it created an interesting effect where reality and art blended together. "Are you going to run for the board?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants nothing to do with HOA politics. But part of me thinks I could help prevent this kind of thing from happening to other people." "You'd be good at it," Claire said. "You care about doing things right, but you're not power-hungry like Sharon." Over the next few days, I talked to more neighbors. The consensus was that I should run. Tom volunteered to be my campaign manager again, joking that he was getting good at it. I threw my hat in the ring. The special election was low-key compared to the drama of the propane tank saga. I ran on a platform of reasonable enforcement, clear communication, and treating homeowners with respect. My opponent was a real estate agent named Brenda who had been friends with Sharon. She didn't stand a chance. I won with 70% of the vote. My first board meeting as an official member was surreal. We spent most of the time reviewing and revising the community guidelines, making them clearer and less arbitrary. We established an appeals process for violations and created guidelines for the board itself about what constituted reasonable enforcement. Greg Thompson, who was still on the board, was surprisingly helpful. "I should have spoken up sooner during the propane tank thing," he admitted. "Sharon had a way of making you feel like questioning her was betraying the community." "That's how people like her operate," I said. "They confuse their personal preferences with community standards." We established that painted propane tanks were explicitly allowed as long as the artwork was tasteful. We also revised several other outdated or overly restrictive rules that had been causing problems. The HOA transformed over the following months. We started a community garden. We organized neighborhood events that weren't just about enforcement, but about actually building community. Violation notices dropped dramatically, not because we stopped enforcing rules, but because we started focusing on actual problems rather than petty grievances. Michelle from across the street did end up getting a mural on her AC unit. She hired Isabella to paint a scene of the Sonoran Desert that made the unit look like a window into the wilderness. It was gorgeous, and the board approved it without complaint. Tom got rid of his apparently non-compliant rocks and replaced them with whatever the hell he wanted. Nobody said a word. The mural on my propane tank became something of a tourist attraction in Gilbert. The city's tourism board even added it to an informal public art walk. Isabella got several more commissions from the publicity, including a huge piece for a downtown Phoenix business. 6 months after the whole ordeal started, Arizona Highways magazine did a feature on outdoor murals in the state. My propane tank was included, along with a sidebar about HOA conflicts and art. "You've become the face of reasonable HOA reform," Claire teased when the magazine came out. "How does it feel?" "Weird," I admitted. "All I wanted was to keep my propane tank and make Sharon eat her words." "Well, yeah, that too." A year after the initial violation notice, I was still on the HOA board. Sharon Pemberton had moved to Scottsdale, much to everyone's relief. The neighborhood had become noticeably friendlier. People weren't afraid to paint their front doors fun colors or add personality to their yards anymore. The propane tank mural had faded slightly from sun exposure, so Isabella came back to touch it up. She refused payment, saying the original commission had led to so much work that she felt obligated to maintain her first viral piece. We had a little party in my backyard when she finished the touch-up work. Neighbors came over with food and drinks. Patricia from the HOA board brought a cake decorated to look like the mural. Tom gave a ridiculous speech about standing up to tyranny. "To Isaac," he said, raising his beer, "who taught us that sometimes the best way to handle an unreasonable demand is malicious compliance in the form of beautiful art." Everyone cheered and drank. I looked around at my neighbors, people who had been strangers a year ago but who had come together to push back against pettiness and overreach. Claire squeezed my hand. "You did a good thing here. I just painted a propane tank. You did more than that. You reminded people that communities are supposed to be about people, not rules." As the sun set behind the mural, creating that same blended effect of art and reality, I had to agree. What had started as a ridiculous HOA violation had turned into something meaningful. Not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. The propane tank sat there on its concrete pad, no longer an eyesore but a symbol. A reminder that beauty could be found in unexpected places, that arbitrary rules deserve to be challenged, and that sometimes the best revenge against petty tyranny was simply refusing to be cowed by it. I never regretted commissioning that mural. It cost me thousands of dollars, hours of stress, and a crash course in HOA politics. But it also gave me a community, taught me to stand up for myself, and proved that art really could change things. Also, it drove Sharon Pemberton away, which was honestly worth the price of admission by itself. The following months brought more changes to Meadowbrook Estates. Word spread about our reformed HOA board, and property values actually increased. Potential buyers were specifically asking about our neighborhood because they had heard we were reasonable, which was apparently a rare thing in HOA land. We attracted young families and retirees alike, people who wanted community without authoritarianism. The neighborhood became known as the place where you could actually enjoy your home without fear of arbitrary fines. I served on the board for 2 years before stepping down. By then, the culture had completely shifted. The new board members elected to replace me and the others were all people who understood that an HOA should serve the community, not the other way around. Isabella's mural remained a point of pride for the neighborhood. We even put up a small plaque near the street explaining the story behind it. Not on my property, but on the community sign at the entrance. It became part of our identity. Home of the famous propane tank mural, visitors would joke. We leaned into it. Why not? It was a good story, and it represented something important about who we had become as a community. Sharon Pemberton, I heard through the grapevine, had joined another HOA board in Scottsdale and was up to her old tricks. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore. Meadowbrook Estates had moved on to better things. Years later, I still live in the same house. Claire and I got married, and we're raising our daughter here. She loves the mural on the propane tank, especially the painted butterflies Isabella added during one of the touch-up sessions. The tank itself will eventually need to be replaced. Propane tanks don't last forever. When that day comes, I'm already planning to have Isabella paint the new one. Maybe a different scene, but definitely something beautiful. 'Cause I learned something important during that whole ridiculous ordeal. You can comply with unreasonable demands in ways that expose their absurdity. You can turn conflict into art, and you can build community by refusing to let small-minded people make everything small. My propane tank used to be just a propane tank. Now it's a statement, a tourist attraction, and a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight stupid rules is with spectacular compliance. And somewhere in Scottsdale, Sharon Pemberton is probably drafting another violation notice for someone's perfectly normal outdoor fixture. But that's their fight now. Mine is long over, and I won it with paint, persistence, and a really talented artist. The mural still makes me smile every time I see it, not just because it's beautiful, though it is, but because of what it represents. The moment I stopped letting someone else's narrow vision dictate how I lived in my own home. The moment a community came together to say enough is enough. The moment art triumphed over arbitrary bureaucracy. All because Sharon Pemberton thought my propane tank was too ugly, and I decided to do something about it in the most literal way possible. I made it beautiful. I made it art. I made it impossible for her to argue with, and in doing so, I changed everything.